number one. And number two, why is it important to have as many of these folks there tomorrow morning as possible?
Okay. Well, we all know it's late. You've been here for quite some time already today. I will try to be succinct. You all have been in the forefront of the fight against this draconian law, the emergency manager law, and you all know how wrong it is. Yeah. You know how this law has been affecting our lives and our communities, how it's been affecting our rights and every aspect of our lives. You know, I'm reminded, before I answer this question directly, I'm reminded there's been a lot of reference here to people referring to, you know, we want to turn the lights on, we want faster response time, we want to feel safe and secure in our communities. And I can't help but think back to the history of when people in a society not unlike ours, but a different country, were talking about wanting to make the trains run on time and being willing to give up their democratic rights in order to make the trains run on time. Well, unfortunately, in the city of Detroit, we don't even have trains. And I could go on and on about the role of the auto industry and how that affected where we are today, but I won't. So this law, the emergency manager law, PA 436, it's not simply wrong. It's not simply immoral. It is, in fact, unconstitutional. Right. And I say this with a very deep understanding that as a lawyer who's been practicing civil rights law for 32 years, what's right and what's lawful do not always meet. Right. And we will find out whether the judge, in our case, Judge Stee, will make that meet. We have filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of this law. And to just get to the specifics of what our claim is based on, it's based on a number of provisions of the United States Constitution. The 14th Amendment contains within it a general substantive due process clause. And what we are saying, and part of that clause says that we, as citizens of this country and of this community, have a right to vote for our elected officials. We have a right to a representative form of government. And as we have been hearing and you have been struggling around, that is, the emergency manager law rips that right out from under us. The state is going to say, oh, well, we haven't taken away your right to vote. Every city that has an emergency manager still has elections. You can still elect your city council. You can still elect your mayor. As we know, going into the ballot voting booth and pulling a lever and saying, I want this person to be my mayor or my city council representative means absolutely nothing when the people we elect have absolutely no power to legislate. And that's what the emergency manager clause does. It violates our substantive due process right to a representative form of government. The 14th Amendment also has what's called an Equal Protection Clause. And what that part of the law says is that the state may not make decisions that result in discriminatory impact when there is an intent to do so. As you know, the emergency manager law coincidentally happens to impact those communities in the state of Michigan in which more than 53% of the African American population resides. This is not a coincidence, nor is it a mistake. It is an intentional decision made by our state executive power in collusion, in my opinion, with the corporate power to go into our communities and usurp our rights and sell it off to the highest bidder. And the most vulnerable communities are the poorest communities, are the communities that have been abandoned by capital flight and racism. happen to be the ones that Governor Snyder has selected to appoint these dictators. And we see what's going on in the city of Detroit, and we've been hearing about it all day. This is just one step. This is a testing ground. And the entire world is watching the state of Michigan. And if they get away with this, I think we can be guaranteed that this is just the first in many states in this country where this law is going to take on life. The law also violates the Voting Rights Act because just like the Equal Protection Law, when a law is passed in which when a law is passed in which minorities in the state are being denied equal access to the political process, that is by definition a violation of the Voting Rights Act. We are also claiming, and we believe, that this law violates the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which prohibits recreating and perpetuating the badges and incidents of slavery. By disenfranchising the majority of African American voters in the state of Michigan, what else could this be? Now, these arguments that we're going to be making tomorrow morning are somewhat untested, because there has never been a law like this that has been challenged in this way, so there's very little case law that we can rely on to tell the judge tomorrow morning, this is right on point, Judge Stee, you have to rule in our favor. He is going to be under a lot of pressure to uphold this law. And it is for this reason, it is so important that not just the lawyers show up in court tomorrow. Both the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit, lawyers have attempted to throw up every roadblock possible to prevent us, to prevent you, and I know there are many named plaintiffs in this room right now, to prevent you from legitimately challenging the constitutionality of this law. When we first filed this lawsuit in March of 2013, it was stayed in July after the bankruptcy petition was filed. When we successfully convinced Judge Rhodes that this case has no business being stayed, this is not a case about the city of Detroit, this is a case about our rights as citizens of the state of Michigan. And he agreed, and he lifted the stay. The state of Michigan and the city of Detroit, through their lawyers, filed motions, one right after the other, motions for reconsideration, motions to reinstitute the stay. They're appealing the ruling from Judge Rhodes. They're filing new motions for reconsideration, new motions for stay. We now are confronted tomorrow with another motion from the state asking Judge Stee to stay the case because, and it's all complicated legal mumbo-jumbo, but essentially because they have appealed Judge Rhodes' ruling lifting the stay, they believe that we should be stopped from even challenging the constitutionality of this law until the appeal is decided so that they can get the stay reinstituted by Judge Rhodes. When we go into court tomorrow morning to argue, we are not arguing the constitutionality of this law, so don't be mistaken about that. We are arguing nothing more than our right to challenge the constitutionality of this law. So the lawyers can do whatever the lawyers do. We can all go to court and argue this legal doctrine and that legal doctrine. Oh, I want to back up for a second. What the state and the city are saying to the courts is, oh my God, this law really might be unconstitutional. And if you, Judge Stee, rule that it's unconstitutional, this is going to screw us all up. This is going to interfere with Herbert power. This is going to slow down bankruptcy.
Julie, it's not the city. Yes.
Yeah, it's
Well,
not the state. It's on the
those
state.
people who are
It's not
representing,
the city.
Say it.
That's right.
It's on-
they,
it's on the state.
unfortunately, they go into court and speak on behalf of the city of Detroit. Miller, Canfield, Jones Day, all getting paid, what, $1,000 an hour or what have you? The city of Detroit's going to be paying probably a good $50 grand just to have their lawyers sitting in court tomorrow to fight against our right, your right, to challenge the constitutionality of this law. So they're saying we have to hold the entire state hostage until the city of Detroit finishes its bankruptcy and until Kevin Orr puts the final nail in the final coffin to our democratic rights. We cannot allow the unconstitutionality of this law, they're saying, get in the way of making the trains run on time.
Yeah.
And we have to stand up to that, and we have to fight and fight in the streets and fight in the courtroom and
We're gonna fight.